Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. I have someone special who's going to talk about submarines and their development within India. Vice Admiral Kannan, who's actually been able to enlighten us about technology in the previous episodes, and I'm actually honored to have him back. My question is not about the France India deals. You can have a deal with France, you can have a deal with Spain, Italy, Germany, USA, anyone for all that matters. What matters is what we can learn out of it. How can we do it ourselves? The country and the Prime Minister has put out a roadmap called Atmanirbharta. How can we use these opportunities? How can we use these structures that India is building currently to be able to do things on our own? And of course, yes, the naval requirements. Are we on time? We are looking at being the net security provider of the Indo Pacific. We are doing deals to expand that horizon onto the onto the Eastern Pacific, and of course towards West Asia as well. With the India, France, UAE trilateral, you've got I2, U2, whole lot of things happening in that domain as well. Are we on time? Will we be able to meet up with the challenge? Let's find out. Sir, thank you so much for joining in and sharing your views with regards this. I think very little spoken about topic maritime security. Now only people have gotten interested since couple of Chinese ships came into the Indian Oceans. Everybody said, "Oh, ship chahiye yaar, jaldi jaldi karo. Let's figure something out." So thank you so much for coming in, sir. And on a light-hearted note, this is going to be an interesting conversation because this is to do with operations plus the infrastructure set up within India. So let's dig into it, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Achint. Uh, it's an interesting topic for us to discuss. How well is India poised to handle indigenous construction of submarines in India? It's not that we have not done it before. We have done it in 1980s, where the Germans gave their design and we built four SSK submarines at MDL, Bombay. Then subsequently, we built another six Scorpions. Oh, the sixth one is almost complete. So we have that program almost finishing, this time with the French design. So we already gone through two programs in the West Coast. And there has been another program which has been going on the East Coast, where Larsen Tubro has been participating as a selected technical partner in the construction of nuclear submarines.
Ah,
So we will not touch upon nuclear submarines in our discussion, but we will definitely touch upon conventional submarines, uh, which are now being planned to be contracted upon these two yards, between MDL and Larsen Tubro. There's a plan to undertake a fresh program of six submarines, for which it's known public knowledge that RFP is already out. And between these two yards, they're supposed to quote. Each yard is supposed to have a design partner from abroad. L&T has chosen from Spain, Navantia, and MDL has chosen, of course, the French partner.
yeah.
So that is the program for six. Uh, of course, it started as a strategic partner only for private sector and all that, but a lot of water has flown after that, and now it is a competition between a public sector and a private sector for this particular order of six submarines, whose design will be not in based in India, not made by our Indian engineers, but from abroad. Now, I will touch upon this design part a little later. As far as the expectation of when Prime Minister visited France last week, there was great hope that there will be another announcement of three more Scorpion submarines to be built as a follow-on contract of the earlier one, which is about to conclude now. Could be there could be some more discussions pending on that. So the CCS has already no, not the CCS. The MOD has already cleared it. Acquisition Council has cleared it. So it could be in the
Anytime now.
flow should happen anytime. So we are going to get 9 submarines if both these contracts come through. Now, you made a statement, are we on time? You said, no, we are almost 10, 12, 10, 12 years behind time because we have not been able to expand our submarine fleet the way we wanted. There was a master plan to do it, but that has not happened. Anyway, at least these two projects should get concluded as early as possible so that we can build and expand our submarine
Hmm.
program, and submarines are commissioned to the Navy as early as possible. Because today Navy has something like 16 or 17 submarines belonging to some Soviet submarines of earlier time, and SSKs from the Germans, and now the Scorpions which have come from MDL. Uh, some of the earlier ones, SSKs and the EKM submarines from the Soviet Union, erstwhile Soviet Union, are they pretty old. They are more than 30, 35 years old. So there's a need for replacing them as well. Obviously, they can't be performing the same way as they were performing when they were relatively new. So there's an urgency. There's no doubt about it. And it's time for us to look at how well we can execute these projects as and when they come. And a lot has to be considered by MOD while deciding where these submarines should get built,
Built.
because the
Hmm.
speed and trials part included uh, depend upon how involved are we in the design, what is the infrastructure we have with us, either with the East Coast or the West Coast, what is the indigenous content we are looking for.
Hmm.
All these aspects need to be considered by us, and obviously also how well we are able to plan and execute the project. So these four factors, I think, are the most important, and they need to be considered by the ministry while they are placing the orders. And it should not be just on the basis of so and so is quoted lowest, and therefore the contract should get awarded. It has to be a mix of many factors
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
than finance, because finally the Navy needs to get the submarines as early as possible in quick time, because it's already more than 10, 12 years late. So I think that is what I would like to say as for these two contracts, which are in the initial stage, and maybe in another 1.5 years time, or max 2 years time, they would be inked and the work can start on both the programs.
So may I ask you something right at this point? Because the factor of we've built submarines before. Now we've done an aircraft carrier. Um, we operate these submarines. We repair them. We maintain them. You know, isn't it now time that there is a setup within India which tries and in, incorporates? What is the setup in India? What is the plan that incorporates this know-how? I mean, I used to ask this to my father. I find it a little ridiculous that I used to actually say that before that, my father's a pilot. I used to say, yeah, you guys fly the jet engine, you repair it, you maintain it. Why can't you make it? So he used to say, it's not that easy. You just go from here, you know. And till it's a logical question when you don't know the technicalities of it. Now, how can we build that ecosystem?
So let's take the first factor of design. I think design capability wise, I think we are fairly well off. Fairly well off. Uh, we have the competence, and thanks to the strategic program running in an active mode from 1995 onwards, for the last 25 years, we have been able to build a design bureau in Delhi only for underwater platforms. So even though they also dealt with nuclear submarines, they are also been participating in some other design reviews and discussions, etc., for the uh, conventional submarines, which we are not designed till to date. We have been only implementing a design done by someone else abroad. So, but there's a fair amount of competence now for them to handle design functions. Uh, when you look at submarine design, uh, it's quite different from that of a ship design, because it has to perform in a different domain, underwater domain, and it's also perform on the surface as well for some of the time when it comes on top. But the type of knowledge required for designing the platform is quite different. Basically, design is talked about in two uh, aspects. One, you should be able to do the basic design, that is, how well the platform will perform uh, as a propelled platform, for its sea keeping, for its ability to dive, for its ability to surface, for its ability to operate with very minimum noise, for ability to get so and so speed. So these are all part of basic design of the submarine, right? Based on which its maneuverability and its sea keepingness, as I told you earlier, all these are considered while you do basic design, and then you do make a model of it. Normally, a wooden model. It's made it made exactly to the size, scaled down, of course, scaled down, and then that is tested in a tank where it is operated in simulated conditions of how the sea would be, how it would be on surface, how it would be underwater, how it will surface, how it will dive, etc. All these aspects are the initial phase of basic design. I think we have a fairly good idea how to do this uh, in within the Navy and within the industry. I think the Larsen Tubro has also been able to build its own cadre of engineers who can handle a good portion of this design part. The second part of the design is detailed design. That means inside the submarine, in the compartment, where will the radar picture will come. There's a radar, of course, for the submarine when it comes to top.
Correct.
Where the sonar will come and where how it will be operated. Engine locations like this, air system is like this. So they are how they are laid out within the submarine. So that comes into the detailed design. It looks into ergonomics. It looks into crew comfort. It looks into how battle damage survivability is to in case there is any damage it suffers. So all these are how things are to be configured. So all these aspects are considered in the detailed design, and I think we have sufficient knowledge uh, to look at the mathematical part of it, and also to produce the drawings in a digital domain. That's very important. That means the designer is able to finally push out all the drawings in a digital domain so that it can be easily uh, undertaken by the shipyard into production. In a compatible format, it is forwarded to the shipyard so that they are able to utilize the drawings for many functions. So I think on the design front, we are comfortable. There could be a little necessity for consultancy in one odd area, I would think, which may surface, which can be easily managed. Anyway, for the two projects which we are talking about in the near vicinity, the design is not a big challenge because the design is coming from abroad. One is a follow-on case, so the earlier design will be continued with. Maybe there may be some small changes within the inside the submarine for some change of equipment or some improvements have been cited for crew comfort, etc. That's all a part of detailed design. And as far as the second program is concerned, anyway, there's a design partner from abroad. Each yard has got its own design partner. So the design is coming from abroad. So we don't have that much of uh, independence in changing the design or making our own contribution. Design is very, very limited in these two projects which are about to begin. So on the design front, we are comfortable. This of course will be the one of the major tasks for the Indian submarine design bureau, because till now they have been only going through some phase of understudy and phase of observer status, and state of participating in trials and things like that. So now they would be really wetting their feet and getting into detailed business on these contracts. So I think design wise we are comfortable.
So it's also about, getting that ecosystem, which is also, I mean, I'll just add to what you're saying humbly, is also the thought process and the mindset which needs to be brought into the brought into bay when in terms of building and in terms of actually having people research more. Uh, I noticed one thing within the space program is that the minute the space was opened up to private sectors, you have rockets suddenly flying off from small little players. Some guy just lights up a rocket, goes up 90,000 feet in the air. Another guy's light a rocket 150,000 feet, and that's obviously a progression. It's a great start to a progression. What is the plan of actually bringing in? I know this is a very technical field, very heavy investment of bringing in private institutions to actually not just build but R&D. Incorporate the technology, because at the end of it, if you're able to produce a market, and that's where the joint statement is very interesting to me, which is currently there on the MEA website, is that we will be working with India to produce for India and for international markets as well. So,
So
I mean, I find that to be a big part which needs to be there. Without which I don't think the growth can be
one of the major factors in this ecosystem is the infrastructure which you have
correct.
to build submarines. Very important.
Hmm.
Now, let's go back to some real basics.
Sure.
Both ships and submarines are built on land. They're built on land, hard ground. So today, of course, we'll talk about only submarines. So they're also built on land. The challenge is how to put it into water after you've built it,
Built it.
right? Now, uh, so what is so great? People have been doing it. Ships have been built on land and put in the sea. There's a huge difference. Submarine is a long, watertight, airtight cylinder, almost like a cylinder. And only after it is completely made for tightness, air tightness, and water tightness, it can be put into water, right? Ships are not so. Ships are open containers like a vessel. It should be watertight, definitely in the bottom half,
Bottom half.
and then it is put into sea. And it remains open like that till such time all the equipment goes on board. And even after equipment goes on board, you will find some other places you get air from outside. It is open, the bridge it is open, etc. So when at the phase of construction, a submarine has to be fully populated. All the equipment has to have to go inside the submarine and just be made air and watertight, and then only put it into water. That means it is going to the water as a fully loaded uh, submarine, except for the armament may not be there, or the torpedoes may not be there, missiles won't be there. Sometimes all sets of batteries may not be on board. But the fact is, it is all the equipment are on board. Now, this necessitates wherever you're going to put it in water, you require deep depth of water should be very, very high, because it has to be lowered into water, and it should be able to do it. It should be able, half of the submarine at least will go below water and half above. While when a ship is put into water, it is light because all the equipment are not gone board. So it is floating comfortably with very little portion underneath the water. Now, if you look at the East Coast and West Coast, there's a huge difference in this particular aspect. The East Coast yards have fairly deep water outside the shipyard. On the seafront, they have deep water capable of launching submarines of fairly big size. On the West Coast, it is not there. So, how does MDL launch a submarine if there is no water? So, if you've seen the photographs of MDL launch, the submarine is actually sitting in a box, empty box, steel box, one huge box to take the submarine size and take the submarine weight. Even after putting the submarine on it, it can still float because the
Wow.
box is very big and it is
Hmm.
empty. Then it is taken away to some other point, in this case, Naval Dockyard, Bombay. It is towed away to Naval Dockyard, Bombay, taken inside the dry dock, and that box is filled with water. When the box is filled with water, with the submarine sitting on top, the box goes down and the submarine remains on the water, floats. So these two are separated. And then the submarine is taken out and for its independent set of activities after that. So this is called using a slave dock. This is not a full dock, but it's called a slave dock or a pontoon. This technique is used wherever you don't have enough water. So when you don't have enough water on your seafront from a shipyard, you have to use different techniques. And the technique used for submarine by MDL is this. All the photographs which are released, you can see it is on a box which is the submarine is sitting, draped in the tricolor before it is taken to
Yeah. Yeah.
the adjacent dockyard where there is water in the dry dock to separate it. So this does not happen on the East Coast. On the East Coast, there's enough water so you can release it straight away uh, into the water
Water.
through techniques of. In fact, the East Coast, Larsen Tubro has got a ship lift, so it's possible to lower it into the sea in a slow manner, and it is able to possible to launch it straight away without having to take it to some other place to release it from a slave dock. So this is one part of the infrastructure. The second part of the infrastructure is if you're going to make on top of boxes like this or the pontoons like this as they're called, then your these pontoons are kept uh, outside your jetty, and
Hmm.
therefore the infrastructure required for the cranes etc to reach across that is a specific part which the infrastructure has to answer. So if you look at the East Coast, it is a shipyard with a huge football ground, shiplift. I'm sorry, a shiplift with a huge football ground type of area where many submarines can be simultaneously built. So the throughput, at least theoretically, which you can have from such a infrastructure is much more than what you would have on the West Coast. So it'll be faster when you do it in an infrastructure which is laid out over the dry open field like thing where it is built with all cranes etc, and then one by one it is put into water when the time comes for its completion of assembly, and then it's put into water. Now these are two different techniques, and we'll have to look at both the techniques for its
Hmm.
effectiveness and the speed with which one can build. So I
Brilliant.
presume this will be an important factor while considering the timelines of the project. Uh, the timelines of the West Coast is fairly well known because they already executed two programs earlier. So that is fair amount of details is available for one to make an analysis. What are the timelines on the West Coast? While the East Coast will be something which has to be technically assessed and then arrived at. So I would think infrastructure wise, uh, one would look at if for a speedy execution, it'll be the East Coast will be a better location than the West Coast. While it's not desirable to have everything on the East Coast, some sort of sharing will have to be looked at by a Modi. But there are two aspects of the building production which comes out in the infrastructure capability and they are able to execute. Key laying to launch. If you take the date of key laying of a submarine, that means the first block after the which has been put on the blocks till the time it got launched
Hmm.
into water is one parameter to look at how well the yard has been able to utilize its infrastructure. Is one parameter. It could be in the form of uh, 3 years, 4 years. It could even go more if the yard has not performed very efficiently. While the second parameter is after it is launched and put it into water. I'm sorry, launch means put into water, right? It is taken to water and put for it touches the water for the first time. That is the term which is used in naval shipbuilding or submarine construction. So from point of launch till it is handed over to the user, which is commissioning, this time is another aspect of how well the yard has been able to coordinate with the crew, with the various companies which have supplied equipment, with the various agencies who participate in the trials, uh, and how well the trials were programmed, and if there are any defects observed during trials, then there'll be some downtime. So these, if you look at our history from launch to commissioning, it is broadly around for conventional boats, conventional submarines is around 2 years, and I think that is something which you should look at how to reduce uh, so that the Navy gets platforms earlier than what otherwise would happen. So these two factors, somebody should sit and analyze the last 15 submarines which have made. We didn't make 15, we made 10. 10 submarines which have been built in India. What has been the performance of of course, there's only one yard which has done it, and looked at how we can crunch it, how you can crunch the time. And that will give us an idea how well the infrastructure is being managed, what improvements can be made in the infrastructure to further reduce the time, as well as how efficiently the trials were taking place. Of course, there's no doubt there should be skilled manpower available for all the work. Of course, there's one aspect which I would like to mention is the most important aspect in the construction part would be the hull work. As you would appreciate, the hull of the submarine is very, very thick. It could be uh, 4 centimeters thick, 5 centimeters thick, depending on what depth it needs to go. And to get a perfect cylindrical shape of a steel plate which is bent uniformly for the diameter of the submarine, which could be anything by 8 meter, 9 meter, 10 meters, like that. That requires special machines in the yard. These sort of machines you don't require for shipbuilding. So this is the very special facility which needs to be available. It is available in the East Coast, is available in the West Coast. It's also available elsewhere in the industry. So it is something which we have, but I don't think we have the steel. Uh, Shipbuilding steel is made in the country. Submarine construction steel is not made in the
It's what
country.
category is it called, sir?
Beg your pardon?
It's called one particular category, right? A B or
Yeah,
something
there
like.
are different names for the steel.
Yeah.
It was in the public media sometime back. There was a trial going on for something made by DMRL, DMRL, which is the R&D lab of the DRDO,
Hmm.
along with I think SAIL. These two people made the shipbuilding steel for the first time, which was called DMR 249 Alpha, which was made for Vikrant's. Vikrant was built out of those steel,
Yes,
and they were
yes,
looking
yes,
at a higher. Sorry, they are
yes,
looking at a
exactly.
higher
So,
variant. Yeah,
hmm,
they are
hmm.
looking at a higher variant of DMR 249 Alpha, which can meet the requirement of submarine strength is the static pressure under which it has to operate below water. It has to withstand that pressure, and also at the same time, it should be as light as possible. Otherwise, you will be finding so difficult to have the submarine propel forward with the speed which you want if it is so heavy. So this is a special type of steel which is required, and to my knowledge, it is not yet available in the country. So one has to import it definitely from abroad. So I finished with the infrastructure part of it. That's a very important issue that we need to look at how our infrastructure is adequate or not. It is not chalta hai. You can't say, "I will manage." No, everybody can manage with whatever you have, but how well you manage to minimize the time for construction, and that will emerge when you study these two figures of performance, which I told you, figures of merit, that is keel laying to launch and separately launch to commissioning. If those time frames can be analyzed and understood, what was the hold up, why it happened, how it can be improved upon, etc. I think that is something which has to be uh, done. But things have changed since those projects. There's far more which Navy is looking for, like there should be more indigenous content in the submarines, which will come here and after. So I suppose that will be another factor which will be given a lot of importance in the future programs. Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's very interesting. Now, when we look at a program development in the future, so one of the biggest things that you would look at is future capabilities and stuff like that. What you're talking about is, of course, I mean, for example, the potential Scorpion deal which is happening will not be the same Scorpions as before, and the same would be for the Rafales. The Rafales that came for the Indian Air Force would not be the same. Probably these have some enhanced versions because it's been about now 2.5, 3 years. Things do develop further. A, a capacity for MRO would be critical, sir. Wouldn't it be? To
Yeah,
kind
but
of.
the Navy has been maintaining all its assets,
Hmm.
seagoing assets, using in-house MRO capability as far as hull is concerned, for certain. But for engines, they have been taking help of the OEMs who have supplied the engines. For electronic equipment, they have been taking help of the OEMs, most of them being from India. Fortunately, most of the electronic equipment which are fitted on Indian naval ships as well as the submarines which are going to come will be manufactured in the country. So there's a fair
Gotcha.
amount of capability within the country to handle the electronic equipment. You may have some difficulty in case you want to modify the software in the equipment, because it may have come with a version when you initially bought it under license from abroad. But as far as engines are concerned, definitely we take help from the foreign OEMs. Uh, Even if it is made by HAL as a gas turbine, we still depend upon LM 2500 if it is a GE gas turbine. Still require GE's help off and on to look at some analysis, especially in case of any malfunction and things like that. It's nice to have indigenous content. There is no doubt about it. But it's not easy. It is long drawn process, and I think Navy has done fairly well amongst the three services to have a very high indigenous content in its seagoing assets. Uh, but I would like to highlight two aspects on this indigenous content. We all read that so and so ship has been commissioned uh, with 80% of indigenous content. Some other thing has been built with 70% indigenous content. Of course, you can break down this indigenous content to how much for hull and how much for machinery and how much for weapons and how much for other electronic equipment and how much for other materials, pipes, cables, etc., etc. But when it comes to submarines, the steel is definitely important.
Most, yeah.
Okay, so that there's no substitute from India. To my understanding, it is not there in the immediate future. So we have to import steel. A large number of uh, other fixtures which are on the hull, which have to operate under the maximum diving depth of the submarine, or the maximum operating depth of the submarine. You want to launch a torpedo at some hundreds of meters below. Then there are systems associated with this, which for which some aspect would be, I suppose, would be imported apart from the torpedo. Uh, Torpedo can be Indian, but there would be some aspects of import in this. All the electronics, I think it's possible to make in the country. Be it there is only one sensor there in submarine, that is a sonar. So the sonar is being made in India. All other electronics, it's possible to make it in India. Communications are possible in India. We will have some difficulties in getting uh, uh, materials like pipes which can withstand high pressure, some cables which can withstand high pressure of water, especially when they are to uh, come out of the submarine and operate at that depth for some equipment. So these are issues where some import will be necessary. But how you define this 70% or 60% is very important. And there has been a lot of discussion on this in the government in the last 4 5 years. uh, it's very easy to say 100 items are required for building this, or 1,000 items are required for this. I am buying from India 600 items, 400 items are imported. So 60% Indian. But actually, these 600 items may be costing only 20% of the cost, and those 400 items would be costing 80%. So, percentage of indigenous content has to be seen from cost as well as from number of items. I would think more by cost. That that has been missing for some time, and the DIPP, which has been coordinating indigenization and Make in India, caught on this point about 4 or 5 years back, and they have been insisting that you have to tell uh, by cost and not by numbers,
Number. Okay.
because you can place an order for a radar on Bharat Electronics, BEL, it gets delivered, and Bharat Electronics in turn has imported items, maybe components or maybe some fixtures, maybe some assemblies, and made the radar. And let's say they spend about 40% of the cost on import. But you can't say there's 100% indigenous radar. There's a 40% indigenous, I'm sorry, import content in that. If you want to really look at what is a genuine indigenous content, so there has to be some clarity on this. And I would think that there's already some analysis going on this front by Navy as well as the shipyards, to make sure that when you say so much percentage of indigenous content, it is not by number of items, it is by cost. Of course, if you're thinking that you have to make something right from design now, get it made in India, designed in India, get it tried out in India, then make it in India, bring it
Hmm.
to naval standards or submarine standards, I think that would be a factor which will adversely affect the project, because we're looking at these two projects to complete in good time, because the Navy desperately requires more submarines in its fleet. So if you're going to saddle it with, no, no, this I will develop in India and then only complete the project, then you have to be prepared to fast track that particular development of the equipment very fast. uh, I won't like to recommend that we should combine a fresh development and put it on a brand new submarine for induction. The surface navy has suffered a lot on this, hell of a lot. The surface navy has suffered during 90s and early 2000, where they were waiting for some missiles to be delivered by indigenous sources. I mean, DRDO's program. And they kept waiting for this thing to come, and they did not come. So ships had to be commissioned even without them, and then some other fitment had to be made, etc. But that, I don't think, is a solution for a underwater platform. So I think they have to take hard decisions on this. That having a higher indigenous content is good, but it should not be at the cost of the
Cost.
overall project delay. And I think that factor needs to be uh, considered in with a higher weightage than for a surface navy. It is easier to retrofit on a surface navy. Lowering an equipment into a ship is far easier than putting it inside a submarine. You have to cut the hull, make an opening, or and then lower it and put it back, go through a series of checks and trials.
Mhm.
I
Quite a
think
bit.
that's not what I would like to. That course of
When
action should not be
yeah,
pursued.
venture into, of course, of course, of course. I think the most important thing that you mentioned is the gap needs to be closed with the expanding maritime interests that India is trying to exert. Of course, with maritime interest comes maritime protection. For that, you need the navy. There's just no question about it. You need to expedite this, and of course, the submarines. To me, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So, although they're a decently old, about a closing, I think, 100-year-old weapon, but the strategic importance of submarines are being realized now when the larger, you know, pieces of naval equipment which are visible over the surface are also vulnerable, or actually more vulnerable than a submarine would be. And it's silent, it's powerful, it's strategic, and it can give the advantage of protection as well as, reaching your or expanding your maritime security interest zone. So I guess that's one of the most important thing that I learned
There
from
is,
your discussion. And
there is
with
one
this.
more factor which I would
So,
like to highlight when either of the shipyards, whoever
so
gets the order. There are only two shipyards, so either of them get the how fast they are going to do this program. Obviously, quality is not a question in this. It has to meet the 100% quality levels which you plan. But how well they plan and how they execute is an important aspect. And that is where I would like to say there's a term called program management. When you're going to build a group of six submarines or four submarines or three, it's a
mm,
program. And there is a factor of how well the yard does the program management, uh, utilizing its resources, including the infrastructure. How do they manage the transfer of from the design person? In this case, it could be from abroad. How it will come to India? uh, Obviously, it will come in some digital format. How it will get buttoned up with the production machinery, so that it is easily executable, so it is easily transferable,
yeah,
and how well the warehousing function will take place, how the procurement of items required for this will take place, how to do the work only when you have all the items, so that you don't get into 50% done, 70% done, leave it waiting for some more items to come. Actually, it doesn't take you very far in time. It's best is to wait for 100% items and then do it. but that doesn't mean uh, you you make some you create some delay in some procurement. So I go back to the point of indigenous content. So I want to import this particular equipment, let's say a pump from abroad, but there is a industry in India who's trying to develop it. He has said he will do it in 1 year, and he has started the work. Should we hold up the main program waiting for this indigenous source? Of course, it will increase your indigenous content. But the other one, which is almost off the shelf, or it's a regular item which has already been used in other navies, it's better to consider all this and then say we go ahead with the import. This indigenous one, as and when it comes, if it is one to one, we will see it in the uh, halfway through the program, the first ship of the first submarine of the program. We need not wait
Yeah,
for this.
yeah,
These
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
decisions have to be taken, uh, taking into account the contradictory factor of indigenous content. You have to sometimes sacrifice that for the uh, benefit of the program. So coming back to the program management, uh, the the way the yard executes the work while it is under construction, a lot of it is overseen by the customer. The Navy has got an overseer stationed at the shipyard to make sure all the compartments, all the equipment are fitted as per the design. So he is a very important uh, component of the overall ecosystem, the customer, and he has to be completely on board on the technical part of it before we cross that stage when it is tick marked and we go to the next step. Now, how this interaction takes place is very, very important. Most of the shipyards are now abroad have gone to digital interaction between the customer and the shipyard. They are operating on a common uh, domain, common network, common system where drawings are examined, uh, their observations are uh, analyzed, and then corrections, if required, are to be made. Are made. The quality control person from the shipyard, who is the first level for quality control, his comments are on this in the system, which is available to the customer. So it is very, very important that you create the necessary uh, digital system where customer, quality control, quality person, the production person, the design person, the warehousing person, the planner, all these are operating on the same systems, and they look at how the work is progressing. Even the safety person is also on board, assuming that there will be some additional layers of safety required when they are working in very critical locations within the submarine. So the US shipyard, which built USS Ford, uh, uh, Newport, the shipyard at Newport, which built USS Ford, uh, I think it built about 8 years back or 7 years back. It built the USS Carrier. It was the first warship built using a digital system called Shipbuilding 4.0. Why it was named 4.0? Because industrial applications had gone from 3.0 to 4.0 because they started using the cyber space for getting more participants in the program. So it was called Shipbuilding 4.0, and they used it very, very effectively. And they could crunch a lot of time. The time on task of engineers was very, very high in the Newport shipyard. So in India also there have been some shipyards which have been trying to make something similar. Uh, and what happens is at the site, inside the submarine, inside the ship which is being built, you have the engineer as well as the quality person, as well, etc., all operating through a handheld pad where detailed diagrams are there, they're examined, and then they are looked at how, rather than looking at huge drawings which take a lot of space, you can't pull it, open it inside the submarine because it's so cramped. It becomes so easy to perform on the spot. You're able to analyze and conclude whether it is meeting all the requirements. And this, they did it for the aircraft carrier very, very creditably. So I would think any shipyard which wants to do projects like this in the future, future means it's already, clock has already started from now onwards. They should look at empowering their staff. They are able to do with these digital aids. Even the measurements are using digital aids. You want to know the distance from this point to that point, it is using a digital aid, right? It is the question of a small transmitter here, another receiver there, and they say it is exactly to the point 1/100th of a millimeter. It gives the distance. No more using conventional scales of measurement. Even for angle measurement, it is using laser and uh, finding out how exactly it is aligned. So all these aspects have come in a big way. Even leveling, what you do, the spirit level, even the spirit level has become digitalized now. So you're able to level it perfectly because that will give you in fraction of a millimeter how well you are leveled. And then straight away, when everything is leveled, you just press one button on that machine, the data goes to the laptop which is connected to it, and everything is taken to the laptop. So you don't have to write everything, note down the thing, come outside and then make a report, type it. So a lot of time is saved. The productivity is very, very high. And that's why the time you will take to build a ship or a submarine is crunched. These are techniques which are used to crunch the time. So that's why I told you the two factors: key laying to launch and launch to commissioning. These are two important parameters because key laying to launch is mostly in an industrial environment.
Mm.
Work is happening, it is getting completed, cables are laid, painting is happening, so many workers are engaged in work. But moment it is launched and going over, the crew walks in, they start doing their job, and then they are examining one by one, they're looking at books, they're looking at various aspects, and then they take it to sea for trials. So if these two aspects are very clearly examined, analyzed, and then some way ahead is found to reduce the time, I'm sure, be it MDL or be it Larsen Tubro, who is going to do any one of these projects, they'll be able to come out with the platforms commissioned into the naval service as early as possible. Past performance has not been a very good aspect, because obviously let's say they're all part of the learning curve, but I think we have learned enough lessons on the type of delays which can come in and how
I always
delays
say this, sir. We
huh?
need to live in
Sorry?
the future rather than the past. And I've been saying that so many times.
I agree
Yeah,
with you. We have been uh, our own enemy on this front.
absolutely.
We
There's
quote
just no question.
So we have been quoting some method by which we will find some other rule why it should not be done, and rules of course made by us only. It may not be technical also sometimes. So anyway, that apart, program management considered all these aspects, and I suppose the people do it with some different type of approach to completing the projects. These two uh, underwater platform projects are very, very crucial for India. We have been crying oh so over the number of depleting numbers of submarines in the Indian fleet, notwithstanding the recent additions of Scorpions which have come. So there is a need for fast tracking these projects, and everything which needs to give way to the speed has to be done, as long as you ensure the quality of construction and the quality of trials are meeting the requirements of the customer, that's the Navy. So let's hope that that happens, right? And we will see on this. We'll keep looking at this news, how it develops, when it will happen, and how serious issues are uh, on the front.
Absolutely, sir.
I think
These are going to be.
sorry,
No, please, sir, go on. I'm saying
we
these
have
are going to
covered
be,
most of the issues.
very, very.
Beg your pardon.
These are going to be, long-term issues that one will have to roll over with time. It's going to be
Yeah,
very difficult to kind of
but these are issues which are
endemic.
uh, not addressed at the beginning of a project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Normally,
They
I
become
find
endemic.
they are formed at the report at the end of the project, and then it doesn't get read adequately at the higher levels. It doesn't get addressed. It gets discussed, and then we have time for a new project again. And many lessons which you have learned are relearned, because new set of people are in different parts, different levels of the hierarchy. So it
Hmm.
doesn't happen. So there is a need for uh, imbibing all this into our way of running projects, and let's hope it
There's no
happens.
question, sir. This is an endemic, and it becomes quite a problem because you know
We
there are
should
just
start
so
at some
many.
point of time.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess that's a better way of putting it, sir. Uh, sir,
the,
this has
ind-
been a very.
I would
Sir,
think the industry,
hmm,
be it MDL or Larsen Tubro, they would be very keen to complete the project as early as possible, because for them it is uh, quickly finish the work and ready for anything else which is required, be it for Indian requirement or even for export. So,
that
and the world is looking at us, how well we are doing, because everyone knows when you launch the ship and when you finish the trials and when you commission, it's all in the public domain. People can come to their own conclusions and analyze it. Um, uh, for the brief time I spent, not very brief, 5 years, I spent in the L&T shipyard after retirement. Many foreign delegations had come during my time from different parts of the globe, uh, both from east as well as west, and they would all come prepared, saying in so and so project it took so long for you to do this. In so and so project, it was done with this sort of timing. What exactly happened? Why you took so much time? And you can't blame, no, a customer was like this or anything like that. We can't say. We are supposed to take care of all the technical aspects, including the customer's requirement for quality checks. So that is a time we realize that a far more higher level of scrutiny is required in your performance. We have a sense of assured satisfaction. Customers Indian Navy, yard is Indian. Okay, everything is fine, even if it's a little bit of delays here, there. No, it only when you have a very, very demanding customer who insists that you have to execute as per the contract, it's your time, and make sure that everything which he's supposed to do is done. You will find that sort of sense of urgency comes in the industry. Otherwise, you see 100 government programs are running, and how many are uh, on time and how many are delayed. Of course, there's been some improvement in many of the asset creation programs by this government, especially with respect to infrastructure. We have seen many of them are being finished on time, be it about railways, be it about roadways, etc. But on the defense side, I think some more speeding up is required.
absolutely, sir. There's always scope for improvement. Thank you, sir. This has been an interesting conversation. Of course, there's a lot that a lot of people might not, run by when you look at media reports and stuff like that. there are these questions which are logical in on the face of it, but devoid of reality sometimes, as the one that I asked you, as I used to think when I was a kid. So that is something which is, I think, of course, a larger common perspective in India, that why can't we do things on our own? There are loads of things that need to be done, and I think you've elucidated those things pretty clearly today, and I thank you for that, sir. Always a pleasure talking and learning with you, sir. Till next time for another
Thanks. Thank you,
interesting
Sachin. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Good
deep
I could
dive, sir.
participate in this topic. Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Bye-bye. Jai Hind.